Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I think almost everybody in this room I know. So I'm Janna Morishima. I'm a literary and illustration agent specializing in children's graphic novels. And I have with me Manuel Godoy from, did I say your last name right?
Yeah.
Black Sands Entertainment, which is a company specializing in entertainment, comics, and animation for African American families. And a little bit about Manuel's background is that he's a U.S. Army veteran with a telecommunications background who founded Black Sands Entertainment in 2017 with an initial Kickstarter campaign that raised $20,000. That's right?
Correct.
Correct. All right, I'm taking off my glasses here. So, as I said before, one way to describe Black Sands Entertainment is that it creates comics and animation aimed at the African American community with an emphasis on history prior to slavery. But another way to say it is the way that you say it on your WeFunder page, which is Black Sands, The Seven Kingdoms, which is your flagship series, is an open rebellion against typical Hollywood whitewashing, and it is by far the most successful indie comic series out there right now. Why is that? Because the Black community made it happen. So that sort of is a nutshell of why I wanted to have you here tonight, because you don't mince words, and you have had pretty surprising success. A long time ago, I worked for Diamond Book Distributors, so I worked with a lot of very small and medium-sized comics publishers, and I know the sort of typical success of an indie publisher, and I know that your sales figures are atypical, so that's another reason why I wanted you to be here. So I just want to start off, I want to say to everybody that I'm going to ask a few questions to get the ball rolling, but hopefully we're going to have so much fun talking that you guys are going to start having your own questions, so I'm definitely going to let there be plenty of time for a Q&A here. So just to get this started, tell me your origin story. How did this company come to be?
Yeah, well, I was a military veteran, and I went to telecommunications engineering after I left the military, right? So I was doing that. It was the good old boy system in the South. You know, I knew somebody who knew somebody. They got me in there. Didn't know anything about engineering, right? But I was really good at learning how the heck to, you know, use BSD CAD and develop these maps. So I was making like $2,000 a week doing this. Huge amount of money coming in, right? And then, you know, typical American style, entire field gets outsourced to India. And we're talking about across the United States, right? So there's no transferable skill, nothing. It's all gone, right? And so I was trying to figure out another way to go and do something like that. But remember, I don't have an engineering degree, right? I just know how to engineer, but I don't have an engineering degree or anything. So I went to school to go and get a degree, do all the stuff that I normally would do, that military veterans do when they don't really have a space to go, right? And what happened was I couldn't find gainful employment for like 4 years, you know? So I'm like, at least I got my VA benefits, right? I'm hanging in there. Me and my wife were traveling San Diego, then we went to New York so she could pursue her fashion career. And in New York, I said, all right, I'm gonna write my story. I've been writing it for a while, but now I'm really about to get serious in it. And I started developing a video game called Black Sands Legends of the Rift, right? At first, it was wildly unsuccessful. All right, so I really lost a lot of money developing this game, mostly because I didn't really know how much money it costs to make video games, right? So I was like 20,000 in the hole already, right? And I was just at beta. Like, I just created the demo for the game, and I was like, man, there's a lot more production I gotta do, and I'm not popular yet. So I pulled the reins back, focused on my Instagram account and Facebook, you know, and thinking of ways to market to get more people to pay attention to us, right? And then I invested about $5,000 to make a marketing decision on my series, right? I said, all right, this game is unviable. Story is, but the game itself is unviable. How can I make this into something that will sell? So I said comic books, but comic books is not really a marketing decision, right? It's just a different medium. So I had to go even deeper, and I said, all right, what comic books sell today? What shows are popular today with audiences? And I was like, Shonen Jump's really wild right now, Naruto is banging and everything else. I said, what do all these shows have in common? They start with kids. Sure, these kids can blow up planets, but the whole point is they're kids, right? So I said, there's no kids in Black Sands right now. So I had to skip a couple of generations in the story in order to find some kids, right? And we did a whole bunch of decisions to make that happen, and then we came out with Kids to Kings, which went on Kickstarter in March of 2017, right? And we raised about $20,000 off a $4,000 goal, and ever since then it just took off. We probably didn't start selling to November of 2017, right? But within November and December, we did like $60,000 in that Christmas season, and it was mostly off of a viral ad that I did. Kind of disparaging Hollywood, but we'll get to that later.
Okay, I feel like you just talked about a whole lot of stuff and made it sound like it just was all effortless. And
I told you I lost $20,000.
No.
How was that effortless?
Wait. No. So,
Oh, I was in a situation where it was almost completely over right away. So during that Kickstarter, right, I already lost $20,000. My wife is like, yo, come on, man, we can't be burning money like this, right? So I was like, all right, Giselle, check it out. If I can't raise this money for this Kickstarter, then I guess I'm just not as good as I think I am, right? I'll just get a 9-to-5 call a day, and we'll live happily ever after. I'll just drop all this creative stuff completely. And that was my bet with her. I said, oh, I already messed up with the game, so, what can I do? And sometimes, you need to have that moment, right? Where it's just a complete 180 pivot. Sometimes it just don't work. I've seen people who are artists, right? And all of a sudden they want to be creators, right? And some of them are just terrible at creating a story, right? They can kill the art, but they have no clue how to manage a team, recruit, deal with any of the legal stuff that's required to be the creator, right? But they won't accept it, right? I always say that some people are just specialists. There's nothing wrong with that. You need them, right? Some of them make more money than the creators themselves, So, but that was one of the things. I was ready to walk away if that Kickstarter failed. You know what I'm saying? So that is something that was very serious at that time.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about what you said. When the video game wasn't working, you decided to focus on your Instagram and your Facebook.
Yeah. Well, one thing was I just looked at numbers, and I was like, bottom line is if I go into visual novel space, which was the game genre, if I go into that, it's extremely competitive, and certain specific types of ones like ecchis and stuff like that, they dominate the market share in general. So, if I try to go into that space, right, and I'm not already a brand, bringing a whole audience in there, I'm not going to convert a lot of people on my release, So I was like, all right, I have to completely pivot, make a brand new, a different kind of audience, right? Go into comics instead, right? Where it's more wild, wild west of who's in it to win it, right? And then focus on customers. So instead of trying to convince fans, right? I'm trying to convince customers that the brand is appropriate. So it's one of the major things that I was focusing on was who has the money, how to talk to them, right? Because those 35-year-old, 40-year-old parents are not going to be reading my comics like that, right? But the idea of it is what's driving them to do it. And then what happens is afterwards, when they get it, and their kids are like, yo, that was amazing. When can I get the next one? I won, because now I have a loop. The kid's never going to buy the book. The parents are, but the parents only care about what's the next book because it means something to them. The parent bought it for a completely different reason. They were like, I want my kids to stop looking at Goku as the end all for who a hero needs to be. I want them to at least see themselves, especially if it has something to do with African history, right? And the fact that it's also dope to the kids was like a super added bonus. They were like, that's why I have a lot of lifetime customers. Customers who give me like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 over the course of a couple of years to get their kids in books, to get character slots, all the other things, and now to be investors.
So you're very, very good, I think, at identifying sort of the emotional connection that people have to what it is that you're offering. Is that something that you feel like you come by naturally, like you've always been just amazingly good at that, or is it something that you learned over the course of?
I hate sales.
Okay, so tell me about how you developed that.
Well, the main thing is I do understand that most people buy stuff based off of emotion. On the margin, they're not studying to see what they do. That's why most of the time, most people won't read more than 2 reviews, right? They're like, hey, you got 700 reviews. They're like, 2. They're like, hey, it must be good, right? So there was a lot of things that I was doing to say, first 5 seconds, I don't got them, I lost them, right? And you know, that was the strategy behind, you know, my customer acquisition style, and it kept working, and then I kept scaling it, right? It was like, oh, it's working. I guess I'll focus on that more. I started
but be specific, like the first 5 seconds. What do you, like what specifically are you doing?
All right, so the reason why a lot of people in the industry spend a ridiculous amount of money on the cover, right, is because nobody looks inside the book. Nobody cares about the story, right? The first buy is always just instincts. Nobody's reading the story to see if it's worth anything or whatever, right? The story is for keeping someone, right? Because if you have a beautiful book and then it's trash, right? It's like they're not going to get issue 2. Issue 2 bombs, like gets like 20% retention. And you're like, wow, what happened there, right? Listen, my retention is about 85%. So people who buy issue 1 will buy issue 2, blah blah blah, you know. So that's really good for me. And the thing about it is, that's the truth. The cover matters more than any content in the book. The closer you can make the inner content look like the cover, right? So there's no deception. A lot of people who are used to buying books, first thing they do is just check the first couple pages to see, all right, that was a great cover, but is it really like this? And if they like, oh, that's actually pretty dope too. All right, I'm sold. Very few people will flip it over and look at the synopsis, right? But if they do, that's like super hardcore. Like, that's a critical thinker when it comes to buying, okay? The synopsis reader is somebody who's like, oh, okay, wait a minute, this is basically sci-fi. I love the Expanse, I'm buying it, right? So you know, these kind of things is what drives sales. I've learned it over time. I've learned that memes matter, right? Memes is like the #1 driving force for sales online. Don't just throw a picture up. Nobody's gonna read the caption. It's just unless you put like some kind of like graphic on there that makes it go, read the caption. You know, so you know, that's just, it's important to understand that when you're doing social media content. If it's not on the actual image, 90% of the audience will miss it.
Can you tell me, like, what did your social media look like when you first started, and then how it evolved?
It originally started with a whole bunch of allies, so I was like a cool brand, right? And I was talking to people who were influencers in the conscious community, the ancient community, the freaking parenting community, right? I was like, okay, I need to get my stuff on your page. Here's my message. What do you think? Sometimes they repost it, sometimes they won't. Facebook was really good about pages reposting my stuff, and they were like big pages, right? So it helped me get my initial numbers up. Got to about 20,000 followers using that technique, right? And then over time, it was just viral content and what's it called? And now I have like 100,000 on Instagram and like 90,000 on Facebook. And in one video, you know, episode 1 on YouTube, right? That one video got me like 35,000 followers on YouTube. So YouTube is one of those, if you can make one really good video, it pays out more than anything else, because they're so conditioned to subscribe. You know, they're not conditioned to subscribe on Instagram. They hit like and they out. You know, but when it comes to YouTube, it's almost like that's the like button, the subscribe button. You know, so just think about that. If you're ever like somebody who really make engaging videos, YouTube is your best bet by like 25,000 times margin.
see, what else did I want to ask you about? Okay, so what about your biggest learning curve? So let's talk about since you started publishing, instead of going back to the video game debacle.
Yeah. I say it's the logistics. So there's something I bring up. It's like the 3 deaths of publishing, right? I'm gonna write a book about this one day, right? The three deaths of publishing. And the first thing is finishing the book. You'd be surprised how many people sit on a book for 5 to 10 years or even 1 year. It's absurd. It's your first book. The likelihood of it failing is really, really high, right? But if you get it out, you'll learn a lot about what it takes to make a book, how to be more professional with it, what worked and didn't work about your book in the first place, right? Maybe you can just do a little pivot and now your book's gonna be a success, but that, you said people have 2 problems. They either write forever, right? 3,000, words. No, I mean 3,000 pages of content and won't release a book, or people who also have writer's block, right? And they just get stuck, and they keep getting stuck at the same points because they have no structure to their story, right? So they just go into it and say, yo, yeah, my hero's gonna do this, this, and this, and then they hit a point and they're like, why did he do that? And it's like, because of chapter 3, man. It's like, you can't change it though. You can't fix that. So now they get hit in a million ways to try to get past chapter 6, and they're stuck. So I always say that. The first step is finishing the book. Second step is basically not being able to sell books in a fast enough rate, right? People are comfortable. Oh, I sold this many at a signing or whatever, right? It's like you gotta get that rate up, because what happens is, let's say you sell 1,000 books. Let's make it a smaller number because a lot of people don't sell 1,000 books. Let's say you sell 200 books in a year, right? Which surprisingly a lot of people have that kind of numbers with their book. So if you sell 200 books a year, I guarantee you didn't buy 200 books. You probably bought 50 books at a time, 100 books at a time, max. Right? And you're sitting on them for like 3-6 months. And what happens is, because you did that, the book was expensive as hell. I don't know how much it was, but if it's a color book or a comic or something like that, especially if it's a really high page count, you're looking at books that can be like $6-7 per print. If it's hardcover and you got it from freaking Ingram cheap, then basically, you're paying $14 for a hardcover, selling it for $20. You have to pay for the table to go and sit at the booth to sell your book. So you're paying that upkeep cost. It's like there's so much cost you're going into it that even when you sell them all, you have like a 10% margin. How do you grow? How do you get better? Are you just stuck? So selling at velocity, right? Getting more content, that's the second death, right? And the third, final one is just the logistics of it all. Once you've learned all that, now you gotta figure out how to control cost, how to control your operations, how to deal with not ordering too many books, right? But at the same time, having enough where you don't have a huge stop in your business, right? Being able to control teams, because at this point, you shouldn't be doing everything yourself, right? If you are, your career is literally going to be tight unless you happen to be the next Harry Potter writer. It's like you're kind of still stuck in that zone where you're still going to shows for the rest of your life. Right, you're going to go to.
Well, you're sort of speaking from the point of view of a publisher.
Yeah, because you have to transition to that over time. So like the first 2 steps is you as you, right? You got that's all your personal showings, right? Third one is where you're trying to really make a business now. You know what I mean? So that's the way I see it. It's like the pivot from I have to do everything myself to now my business does things, and I just make sure that it doesn't break.
Very, very few, I think, authors and illustrators think in that way, though. You're really more of an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm more of an entrepreneur than a creator. That's definitely a accurate assessment of what I do.
But I think that it's interesting for authors and illustrators to hear from the entrepreneur's perspective, because there's things that you do that I think are useful for any person who's trying to get their work out there into the world. So, like for instance, selling at
How many offers are here?
Yeah, good question. How many of you are author or artist?
Okay. So the majority.
Majority.
The majority are writers. Or, what were you about to say?
Selling at velocity. So what's your advice for somebody who's not necessarily a publisher, but is an individual author or artist, and let's say they have a book that's published by a publisher. Do you have advice on how they can help their books sell?
Oh, so they got picked up by
Yes.
a publisher.
Yes.
Oh, okay, and now but the publisher is not necessarily doing heavy lifting.
Correct.
So they're trying to supplement the publisher in some kind of form or fashion.
Yeah.
Number one thing is being able to speak to people. All right, you'd be surprised how many people straight up listen to other people, even if their success is not that great, right? Just the simple fact that they've done something and other people have not is a huge asset in and of itself. You understand? So if you notice, Instagram and Facebook, there's almost 1 billion courses out there, right? From people whose only success is selling courses, right? It's like, I'm gonna teach you how to run a successful business. And all right, what's the business that you ran successfully? How to teach this course on successful, right? It's like so understand that anybody could be a teacher, right? And there's a reason why at universities you have all these ridiculously credentialed, instructors and stuff like that. It's because they just didn't make it in their field, right? To be to the point where they don't have time to teach anybody, because you're looking at all these archaeologists and stuff, not everybody's going to be the guy who gets the $5 million funding. So some people have to go and be the instructors of the next generation of archaeologists. So it's the same thing with this publishing thing. Learn how to speak to people, volunteer at panels, whatever. You'd be surprised how many people worship panelists, right? So you go out there and you just simply get out there and be the guy that knows what's going on, even if you're not that successful, it doesn't matter, right? They don't look at that. They just see you as somebody who's achieved something where they have not, right? Because most of the time, people, when they say they're going to a writers conference, they haven't wrote anything yet. They haven't actually published their own book or whatever. They're terrified of doing an independent publishing deal where they make their own book, right? Because they heard so many stories of the second you make it and you don't sell X amount of copies, your career's doomed, right? It's like you can't go to a publisher or nothing like that. So a lot of paranoia is in independent publishing. So just go out there and be somebody that people want to listen to. And that's the easiest way to get your publisher some help in pushing books. Because the second they find out that you're actually likable, right? Because they might have got your book simply because your book was good. But they don't know that you're likable. The second you become the likable person, they might be booking you for stuff. You might be paid speaking things. The next thing you know, you're making more money off of speeches than you are books. I don't know how it works for you, but it might be a scenario that happened to other people, so.
So tell me a little bit about your WeFunder campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Raised $500,000 for 10% of my company, right? One, like I said, going to the three.
Wait, could I just pause you for a minute? One of the interesting things about Manuel is that I met you in November, and you told me I'm going to raise $500,000 on WeFunder in the beginning of 2020. And I thought to myself, should I believe this man? Is this really going to happen? And then you delivered. And I feel like when I read even the past Publishers Weekly article about you, you predicted your revenue that you would have, and you achieved that revenue. So that's one of the things that I think is so amazing about you, is that you say you are going to do something, and then, even though it sounds a little bit ambitious, you actually do it. So anyway, sorry I interrupted you.
Well, one of the main things that my whole business runs on is the 10X model, right? If you can't do 10 times what you said you were going to do last year, then you're not growing, right? Because you can do 2 times, right? But you can also do half times next year, right? It's very easy to drop in sales, but still succeed a lot. For instance, 2019, my sales went down by about maybe 40%. But at the same time, I had just acquired a Disney freaking head of studio for my own studio. I was doing damn near 3 months of legal work for WeFunder in order to make sure that I can raise money with the SEC. So it was a lot of stuff that my money was tied into for the big play, right? I was developing a DVD for dang near 18 months, right?